I want to talk about next is absolute value. Okay. We've talked a little bit about it. You've been exposed to this concept in your algebra classes. Okay, there's two cases when you evaluate an absolute value. And if you take the absolute value of a number, it's either equal to itself or the opposite of itself. When is it equal to itself? If the original number is positive, so that involves this relationship, right, using the number representation. And what about if it is 0? Would it fit this top one? Would it really matter? Wouldn't really matter, right, because 0 has no sign, so the opposite of 0 is just going to be 0 itself. Okay, but really you're looking at if a is a non-negative value, then it's going to equal itself. When is a going to equal the opposite of itself? If it originally was negative or less than 0. Okay, so here's what you're looking at in terms of absolute value. Okay, now the place where this gets tricky, and so again, you're going to see some things that you've seen before, and the place where this gets tricky is when it involves something like this. Okay, now remember, your final is going to be no calculators except for the last 15 minutes. And so even though you guys have access to calculators, everything that I go through or teach in here will be, I'll show you how to solve it without using a calculator. Okay, try not to use the calculator as a crutch. Okay, use it to check your answers. Okay, you do want to get familiar with using it. But there's no way that you can do all the questions on the final in 15 minutes. And so you can't just hang out until you get to use your calculator. So learn to do these without a calculator, and this is one of those cases, because if you understand the concept, this winds up being a really easy type of question to solve. Okay? And the reason is this will either be the value itself, right, or the opposite of that value. Yes? It's going to be one of these two things. Okay? And how can we determine which one it is? Is this original value negative or non-negative? So think about it. Is the square root of 2 a value that's smaller than 3 or larger than 3? It's smaller than 3, right? So 3 minus the square root of 2 is going to be a positive. So which of these would it wind up being? When we take it out of absolute values, it's going to be this form. Okay, what if I did something like this? Absolute value of 3 minus pi. So again, mentally you want to think it's either going to be 3 minus pi or the opposite of 3 minus pi. Okay, you choose which one based on, is this original value positive or negative? Here the original value is negative, so we're going to use the bottom one. Okay, and if we simplify this by using the distributive property, we get a negative 3 plus pi, which will often be written pi minus 3. Okay.
You have to simplify it down that far.
Well, the other way to think of this, and this is I wanted you guys to see why we're doing this, and then I'll show you the other way to think of this, is what we did when we looked at distance on a number line. You guys recall this? Distance on a number line is equal to the absolute value of the difference of coordinates. You recall that from the geometry stuff? So remember we had two versions of this. Either a minus b in absolute values or b minus a, it didn't matter. Well, this is explaining why it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's going to be one of these two forms here. So what you can do, anytime you see the difference of terms inside of an absolute value, you can switch them. Okay, so if I gave you absolute value of root 7 minus 3, okay, how else could you think of this? Absolute value of 3 minus root 7. It doesn't matter. You can think of it either way, and you should be able to think of it either way. And then to figure out which one comes out of the absolute values, which one winds up being a positive value. Which of these? Is 3 minus root 7 positive? Yeah. And root 7 minus 3 would be a negative. So if you just take this one right out of its absolute value, you have your solution. Does that make sense? And now, if you're using your calculator to evaluate this, have we talked about where the absolute value is located? Have we ever done an absolute value on the calculator? Okay, it's one of two things. You can either type in the words ABS. So here we could type in ABS in AlphaLox, and then let's say we evaluated absolute value of root 7 minus 3. If you type this into your calculator, it would give you the form of your answer that we would be looking for. Okay, so the other way, instead of locking the alpha keys and typing ABS, is if you go to this math key, which is second function 5, where it says the word math above the key, there drops down a big list, and underneath the number list is where the ABS is located itself. So you can actually go in and find it if you want, and then type in this case, square root of 7 minus 3, close off the parentheses, and when you hit enter, again what you see is it's the opposite of root 7 minus 3, so again it reinforces that concept. And if you ever have answers that are written as factors, okay, right, because this is -1 times another expression, if you go to the Algebra tab, F2, and click on Expand, it'll write it out as a polynomial or as an expression, not as a set of factors. So notice I put the cursor in front of ABS. I go up to F2, and I choose Expand, which is number 3. Once again, it needs to be enclosed in parentheses, so I can close that off. And when I hit Enter here, it puts it into the order an expression of an actual single expression instead of factors. Okay, so if you come across a question like this on your final, do it by hand. If you're not sure about it, you can mark it, come back and double check it with a calculator if you wanted to verify that. And that's the whole point of using the calculators on the final, is going to be so you can go and verify any questions that you might have.